My name is Esther Arroyo, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Family Forum. And I have a son, Kai, who's 24 years old, and he has multiple disabilities, and he's currently in a day program. He's doing great. Could do better. And then Cindy, go ahead.
Hi, I know most of you, but for those of you I don't know, I'm Cindy Bayonis. I'm one of the co-chairs, originally started with Judy Cohen a few years ago, but I've always been involved with this organization even before what it was, when it was Jewish Residential Services. So I've been involved with the transition age from, I think we started Lexi around 14, so that has always been my interest, transitioning into adulthood. Anyways, I have a daughter. Her name's Lexi. She's 33 years old. She lives at home. She has intellectual disabilities. She's in an amazing day program. We had a speaker here last time we spoke, and she goes to Aspire. She could go 5 days a week, but I have her going 3 days a week. She loves it there. She's fun. The other days, I usually do all kinds of fun things with her, but I'm always looking for, long-term planning. That's what our family forum is all about, because we're getting older and our kids are getting older, right? So we look at day programs. We're looking at housing, long-term planning, all kinds of resources.
Peer support.
Family support. You go. Your turn.
That's it.
I probably said too much.
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, well, that was it. That was it.
Well, we needed Astor. Astor just came along, last year?
Last year, yeah.
Because she brings all different kinds of resources to the table.
I tried. Yeah, I'm not really good at public speaking, as you can see, so I'm not good up here. So anyway, so that's a little bit about us and a little bit about what the Family Forum does. And Cindy, do you want to introduce the speakers? Okay, let me see if I can. I am going to mispronounce this terribly. Oh my God, and I just went through this with Karen.
Where is it? Emmaus.
Emmaus. Okay, thank you. I literally just practiced the pronunciation with Karen. Okay, is it Karen Jacobsen? Okay. So we're gonna start with Karen. Are we gonna have both of them? Where is do you want to have both of them talk, or just one at a time?
We're gonna have each of them talk one at a time.
Okay.
And then we'll have questions afterwards, and then.
After both presentations, right? Okay.
And then at the when we're done with that, we'll have some time to network with them and amongst ourselves.
Okay, so you can see this is very informal. Okay, so Karen, if you can come up here and talk about.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting us into this beautiful space. This is my first time here, and Emmaus actually just bought a building in Scott Township that we're renovating, so I appreciate the amount of work that goes into the finished product. So hopefully this time next year, we can invite you for a tour of our new facility. My name's Karen Jacobsen. I'm the CEO of Emmaus. I've been with the organization, it was 30 years in March. I started as a direct support professional, and I just fell in love. I fell in love with the work, with the people, with the mission. And so I became director when our founder retired back in 2008. So I've been the CEO for about 16, look at how old my youngest is. So 16 going on 17 years. I do have some slides. I can maybe try some. Can I ask you to be my slide changer? That'd be great, because So I've been with Emmaus a very long time. I've been in the field a very long time. And so I've seen some changes. And you can go to the next slide. Our organization was started by parents. The woman on the left here is Cece Wagner, and she's the youngest of 4 siblings. Her parents are Ken and Lorraine Wagner. And when Cece was born in the 70s, in the 70s, we were pretty close out from the closure of institutions. In fact, some institutions are still open in Pennsylvania today, right? So the Wagners asked the hardest question to ask and the hardest question to answer that you as parents know too well is, who will care for my child when I'm no longer able or no longer around? And so they started to do some research and realized in the 70s, there weren't a lot of housing options. And those that were, group homes in the early days had a really bad reputation and not without reason. And so they were determined to create something when Cece grew up, and not just for their daughter, but for people like Cece. So they founded Emmaus Community with the help of family and friends. They just started meeting monthly. They chose the name Emmaus. We are a faith-based organization that welcomes people of all faiths. We are not associated with any church or congregation or denomination, but it is a scripture story about breaking bread. And so regardless of one's background, we break bread with people. Some might see, their own spiritual inner self in sharing of the breaking of the bread. We have staff who come who maybe don't have any faith background. For them, it's about recognizing the beauty and the dignity of people with disabilities. And so we literally sit at table and break bread with people, but it's more importantly a sharing of our lives. It's looking at each other, people with and without disabilities, walking the road of life together. So next slide. We were founded in 1989. Tonight I'm going to talk about the various services that we offer, and I understand tonight is really about long-term planning. So the first three services here, community homes, supported living, life sharing, those are residential services. And I'll focus on that and talk about what the difference is, because there's a spectrum of services that are available. The next two have to do with in-home support, and some of your adult children may receive them already. They live at home, a HAB aide used to be called, or a direct support professional comes and works on in-home and community support or companion services, and I'll talk just a little bit about the difference. And then community participation supports, Emmaus just started providing that about a year ago. Those of you whose children have jobs or work in the community know Pennsylvania is very focused on employment. We're an employment-first state. The state really is encouraging people with disabilities to seek employment, competitive integrated employment. So I'll talk about CPS. And then we also, about a couple of years ago, started the special needs pool trust. Some of you might be familiar with Passivant has one, Achieve a Family Trust, the ABLE accounts. This is a long-range financial planning tool for adults. Okay. So our community homes at Emmaus, that was our primary mission. We started with one house, one resident, and Ken and Lorraine were the live-in staff. And then I came along when there were two residents and one house, and the rest is history. We now have 17 homes, and these are licensed by the State Office of Developmental Programs. So in these homes, people receive 24/7 care. There's a person on site 24/7, 365 days a year. We build our programs and services in the home. We want it to look and feel like family, right? Shared responsibility, shared meals, but it's very individualized. If 2 or 3 people are living together, each one has a separate ISP. And so the services are built around what each person's individual needs are. So here's a couple of our residents. That is, we really are helping people to live their best life. Right? What each goal is different. Each person's goals are based on their preferences, their skills, their likes, and their dislikes. So next slide, please. Supported living and the next service I'm going to talk about, life sharing, are different models of residential. And these supported living is for people who are able to live in their own house or apartment. Right, so they have the skill to be more independent, but they need help with maybe financial, planning, budgeting, medication, making and keeping their doctor's appointments, making sure that they're eating a good, well-balanced diet, etc. So we provide up to 30 hours of face-to-face time in the individual's home, but we provide 24/7 on-call support. So if there's an emergency or a problem that they can't solve on their own or they need advice, direction, we have that available. So that's a very new service. This is an unlicensed service. So the Office of Developmental Programs, while they come annually to look at the group homes, the licensed, we've gotten away from using group home. They're called community living arrangements. As you all know as parents, there's so many acronyms that even working in the field 30 years, I'm still learning and trying to keep track of all the acronyms. We call them community living arrangements. We just call them homes. They're residential homes. If you drove through a neighborhood where one of the Emmaus homes is, you really couldn't pick out which one is supporting people with intellectual disability and staff around the clock. So we take good care of our yards and our gardens and the fronts of our homes, and we meet our neighbors and we attend block parties and all of that. So supported living is an option for people that maybe have already some more independent living skills. Okay, and we're just getting that off the ground. Next slide. Life sharing. Life sharing is a model that Pennsylvania started many years ago. It's been growing slowly, and we actually just have one life sharing house. That is where an individual or a couple might invite somebody into their house to live. So it'd be going from somebody's own family to another family type situation. In those homes, again, people live like family. It would be like welcoming a sibling or a niece or a nephew. And so we have one home. We have a couple who actually the individual they're supporting used to live in residential, and one of the couple used to work at an agency, and he really wanted to live with her. And it just worked that she and her partner said, yes, we will do that. And he's flourishing, and the couple is very happy. So we're working at recruiting people who the state will always say, was life sharing offered? And it's a great model for some people. It's very challenging to find the life sharing host families, right? Because you're not an employee, you're a contracted, individual contracted in person. So these folks get a stipend, and the host family is 24/7. So you're providing this residential service around the clock, just all the time. Individuals do get 30 days of respite a year. So they might go to camp, and that's when the family or the couple would get, their own respite from the 24/7. So those are the three financial models. Like I said, Emmaus is just getting into the life sharing and supported living. So community support. In-home and community support are two separate but related services. In fact, even to me sometimes, they look, even on paper and more especially in practice, they look very similar. But the difference between these, when somebody's living at home and you have a waiver, and we'll have time for there's so much I could talk about, but I want to give Lori time and give time for questions and answers. There's 3 different waivers, each 2 are capped at certain levels, and then there's uncapped. But in-home, staff is coming in to work on goals. And in-home can be worked on in your house with your individual or out in the community, but you're working on socialization, money management, transportation, whatever the individual's goal, you're working on a goal. Companion is provided when, sometimes parents are still working and they really can't or would prefer not to leave their individual alone in the house. So companion is one-on-one support. It can be done one-on-two, but it's usually one-on-one in your home. And you're not working on goals. You're just really being with the person, building a relationship and making sure that their needs are met, keeping them healthy, keeping them safe. So there's no goal attached. CPS, I talked about. Pennsylvania is really moving towards, or is, an employment first state. So community participation supports, while it sounds like the first two, the goal here is competitive employment. It could be helping people learn to write their resume. It could be volunteering so that they can see, do I like working at an animal shelter or a library or a grocery store or whatever the case may be. Community participation supports, because it's employment operated, lots of rules and regs under anything state government is going to be highly regulated. So there's a lot of rules and regs when it can and can't be provided. This is mostly a Monday through Friday service during the day. So we just started providing, some of you mentioned that you have adult children in day programs, and most of those programs now, even though they're going to a facility or going to a day program, they're doing CPS, right? They're either doing facility-based community participation support, working on those skills, or they're being taken out in small groups of 2 or 3 for up to 5 hours a day, right, to work on those community skills. Emmaus had, back in the day, because I've been around, all of our folks had day programs. And then when this philosophical shift changed in Pennsylvania, some of our long-term residents who are older actually lost their day program because they weren't able to kind of fit in with the group CPS. You arrive at 8:30, you go out at 8:45, you come home at 3, and every day you're going someplace different. So we started doing it for our residents. So it's a discrete service, but it can happen within the residential day that we're providing anyways. And so we started with one individual. We have about 10 of our folks who we do, and we do all of our CPS one-on-one. But we are allowed, willing and qualified, allowed by the state to start doing CPS for people that are not Emmaus participants yet. So I included that as something else that we do. Okay, quality of life pooled trust. How many are familiar with the ABLE accounts? So you as parents have this huge responsibility to ensure that your children's assets don't exceed either $2,000 or $8,000, depending on, how much, what type of Social Security they get, and that's so that they can remain eligible for their public benefits, the waivers that are going to pay for all these services. So then there are lots of rules and regs around that. Some of you might have an attorney friend who set up a private trust fund for your individual that is, irrevocable and can only be used for them, et cetera. And you can put, assets in so that their bank account isn't getting too high. We began this, Emmaus is the trustee for this. We started with our in-house, some of our folks have ABLE accounts, some of our folks have Achieve a Family Trust accounts, but we started to do this in-house because it gave us a little bit more flexibility. We can respond quicker to requests for funding because it's in-house. And so we do this for a number of our individuals, but we will soon be offering it to, and we can start anytime now, we can open that up to outside individuals. So that's our newest service per se, along with our move to the new building, which is just, as I said, being renovated. I'm looking at it. We were on the south side for all these many years, and the south side was great until it wasn't great anymore for us. Parking, I'll just say parking. And we were in a building, an old rectory. It was a 140-year-old building.
Come on.
Our building that we bought is 40 years old. So that was a good move for us. We're hoping in the next year to really grow our services. And that's why the timing of this, for me to be here tonight and just share is we are looking to open more homes. We just opened our most recent house in Greenfield, which is not far from here. So, I'm not from Pittsburgh, but I did learn if you cross a river, that might be the Far East. You're crossing a river and a bridge. And so we have, most of our homes are in the South Hills. We have 2 up north, and we have the one in Greenfield now. And so we are, slowly starting to, and Lori and I were just talking at, residential is a highly sought after service. And it's so important to pick the right provider for you and your adult child because it's a long-term, life-term decision. And the challenge, I'm going to ask for the next slide. I have a very short, I'm hoping this works. It's a 30-second video that somebody will just, sorry. That's okay. The biggest challenge is staff. Mm-hmm. Everybody's head's not. And, we could talk a lot about the climate that we're in and the threats to Medicaid and all of that. What's happening right now is families are getting the waiver. There are new waiver slots. That's an old term, but, families get excited because they got the waiver. They got the consolidated waiver, which is capped at, I think, 40 today. They got the community living, that's up to 75 or 80,000. Consolidated waiver, that's your holy grail. That is the waiver that's going to fund residential because it's not capped. So if you need, or your adult child needs licensed residential, you're going to want to be advocating to get the consolidated waiver because it's not capped. Getting a waiver doesn't guarantee services. Providers very much, I always say providers don't take care of people, people take care of people. So I'm going to show this 30-second video, and then my team would really be upset with me. I'd be remiss if I didn't put in a plug for the importance of staff, and you all nodded your heads, maybe your kids have been through, DSP after DSP after DSP, or you have that waiver and you just can't find the provider. It's frustrating. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
I love
Do you make it louder?
I love Emmaus. I love Emmaus.
I love Emmaus because I got nice staff who cares about me.
I love Emmaus because
Serve my friends.
Be around the people I love.
Treat me not as it would be.
Learning how to cook.
That make me laugh.
Color with my mates.
Go out to eat. We go a different trip.
Do some budget. They let me be independent. And that's where my heart is.
We are family.
I love Emmaus.
I love Emmaus.
I love Emmaus. Emmaus is the best.
And then the last slide is just a little bit of a plug. I think it's very important for parents and families to help us to recruit employees because I keep saying to the state, like the workforce we need is not really out there. People aren't going to school. This is my soapbox. People aren't going to school to learn how to support adults with IDD in the community. And it's not easy, right? We make it look easy. I was invited to my friends to work in this field 32 years ago in Greensburg. I was interviewed by nuns, and they told me, all you need is patience and love. I was duped. I thought, well, I have that. My husband and I both jumped right in and became live-in house parents. That was the term back in the day, and we took care of 23 boys ages 6 to 21.
Wow.
But those kids really did teach me everything I needed to know. And then I've just grown, I found Emmaus. We did that for 2 years in Greensburg, came down, found Emmaus Community when it's just getting off the ground. So it's been really fun and inspiring to watch an organization grow from such a small grassroots effort. Seen a lot of changes in the community. The one thing that hasn't changed is the importance of relationship, right? At the end of the day, whether somebody has strong or weak writing skills, or I'm not a good cook. That's what stresses me out about direct care, but my husband is a good cook, so we made a good team. It's about relationship, right? It's about the willingness to open your heart and your mind to relationship. And sadly, Medicaid funding hasn't just kept pace with the complexities of the job, right? This industry is licensed and regulated second only to literally like the the nuclear industry. But compliance does not always translate to quality, right? So I thank you. I wish you the best on your journey as you really do look at what is the best residential placement for your children. And I'll pass the mic over to Lori, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And you guys are here on a fantastic night because I can speak for her. I've known Karen for many, many years, and I think both of our agencies are wonderful agencies and provide a lot of quality care to people. Now, I will warn you about this. I'm the HR director. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, but I'm stepping in for our CEO. So your very nice thing I cannot keep up with, but I am going to try and give you a lot of information here. Everybody can hear me okay? I don't generally need a mic. Can you hear it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Lori LaBarbera, and I actually hold 2 positions at PA Connecting Communities. One is HR director, and the other one is a consultant for our relatively newly opened residential program. I want to tell you a little bit about PA Connecting Communities, PACC for short. But let me give you a little bit of background about myself. I started in this field, like Karen, not really with that in mind, but I went to college for psychology, and I started working for a residential program in the mid-1980s. Worked my way through being a manager, a program coordinator, a supervisor, and then eventually specialized in human resources, trying to desperately bring people into what I thought was a very worthwhile field for people to be in. Fast forward to a couple years ago, I thought I retired, and then I got pulled back into PACC just for a couple part-time hours, and that eventually turned into being HR director. I really, truly want and always have wanted to make a difference in people's lives, and this was a fantastic vehicle to be able to help people. And I think it's such a needed service. You guys are all family members here. There's a lot of folks who don't have families to advocate, and it's fantastic that you guys are here for your loved ones. But these services are just so much needed for everyone. So when I was working part-time for PACC, and there was some talk of opening a residential program, and they came knocking at my door and said, would you help out? I agreed to stay on as a consultant for that and to get the first houses up and running, which we just did this past year. I'm pleased to be part of this organization. There are so many good people working there with great hearts, and it really is a great company. So, many decades ago, things were much different from the way they are today for folks with intellectual disabilities. Karen talked about that for a bit. Our founders were Peggy and Tony Manella, along with Arlene Bear. And they all specialized in special education and wanted to go out to change things. At the beginnings of the agency, Tony experienced firsthand, because he had a brother who was intellectually disabled, and they saw the limitations that family members and individuals faced and the frustrations that accompanied them. Peggy, Tony, and Arlene decided to make a difference and try to start some new programs in place. This was all going on. Karen mentioned again, well, we're going to hear a lot of the same stuff from both of us, I think, but some differences too. That was the time that deinstitutionalization was going on. It was an exciting time. People were coming into community living homes and having the opportunity to grow to independence, to experience all the fantastic things, and to have a choice in what those things were that they experienced. So while that shift was going on, Peggy and Arlene began working with Community College of Allegheny County's Community Services Department. They launched PACC in 2004 as a nonprofit agency. Fun fact, the PA is not for Pennsylvania. It's for Peggy and Arlene. So that's kind of you guys are in on the secret with that now. The initial focus was to train group home staff and participants who lived in the homes, but also had folks from the community attending those events and classes. Another fun fact is this was going on while I was just graduating college, and that was my very first job in the field I had. I did some volunteer work, and they were looking for folks to teach classes, and back then we were teaching things like stranger danger, we were teaching cooking skills. So that was actually the beginnings of PA Connecting Communities. Now we have grown and we offer day, evening, and weekend programs and big, huge holiday dances that everybody's really excited to attend. And that's in our events and programs curriculum. If you guys have ever seen this, that has all of our events. We do over 1,000 in a year. There's some material up there if you'd like to grab it. And also my business cards are up there if you want to grab one and think of questions later. I can answer. I will hang around today though. So now we are providing services not just here in Allegheny County, but also in Beaver, Butler, Washington, Westmoreland, and most recently, the past 2 years, we've focused on Du Bois in the surrounding areas, including Punxsutawney and St. Mary's. In addition to events and programs, we also offer employment, behavioral, home and community-based HAB, and transition services for students aged 14 to 21. So out of all of these, residential is our newest foray. We have just opened, am I keeping this up here? Can everybody hear me? We have just opened our first home last year that serves 2 women in the South Hills. We added a second one this year that serves 1 gentleman, again in the South Hills. And we're looking to open a third home that will have 3 gentlemen already slated to move in later this summer. We have in the near future an apartment here in Squirrel Hill that will be opening, and also a home up in the north in Hampton Township. So that's quite an ambitious undertaking, but we're already looking towards the 26-27 year because we do have to plan that far ahead. We have a partnership with a group called Residential Resources, and prior to me coming to PACC, I worked with another residential program. We also had a partnership with Residential Resources. I was there for 30 some years. I don't like saying it, it makes me feel old. But we worked with this group called Residential Resources, another nonprofit agency. And everyone who I worked with at my previous job said, we are in the business of providing the best services we can to the individuals. We're not in charge of real estate. We can't find real estate. We can't fix it up. We can't make yards look nice, so we'll let somebody else do that. So that's what Residential Resources does for us. They will adapt things that we need if we find the perfect property in the perfect location, but it's not handicap accessible when we need it to be. They'll make those kinds of changes for us. And it's great because it allows us to work on the things that we want to, which are the clients. So when somebody's in our program, in our residential program, what are the things that we work on? That's determined by an annual meeting. Karen mentioned an ISP, an individual service plan. And at least annually, the participant, supports coordinators, residential staff, and anyone else who provides services sits down, and all of our services are, of course, client-directed, in-person centered, which means that it's not everybody else deciding what's important for the person. They themselves are saying, I want a job. I want to make my own money. I want to learn how to care for a garden in my backyard. Things like that. So they're choosing their own lives and what they're going to work on. We will assist in areas like daily living, self-care, medication administration, any health issues, socialization, employment services. We have job coaches. We have behavioral services that can assist both in the home or in the work area. And the client has a say along with their families in whatever it is that they think they need to work on. So that about wraps up my talk. And if anybody has any questions for Karen or I, we can come up here and I'll hand this over to somebody else.
Hi, everyone. Is it sound loud enough?
Yes.
Put it closer to you.
My name's Carol. I have a son who's 41. And I met with you, Karen, a long time ago, and I'm involved with PACC. My son is Chet. He comes to a lot of the programs there, and we love Penny.
Oh, yeah.
So I know she's related to Arlene and Peggy, isn't she? Like a cousin or something?
There's
Go ahead.
back in the day, a lot of people were related because that's how that's how we brought people on board. So
Probably 20 years ago, he used to go to a program in an inaccessible church.
Yep.
In
Shaler.
no, in Point Breeze, Regent Square, and they were so wonderful. All three of them were there, and they would welcome my son every day. He had to come with a caregiver, and not every day. We came a few times a week, but the building was inaccessible. We couldn't use the bathroom,
sure.
but they were so wonderful. But anyway,
We've come a long way since then.
well, you great people. You know, that's really what it takes. Any program can be wonderful.
And
The
Peggy
person.
is still involved, and Orlean and Penny both still facilitate events.
Yes,
So
I know. We
we
go.
have a lot of people who have been there a long time, which is great in this day and age because there is an awful lot of turnover, but
Yes.
we've got some people
They're
who've been there
gems,
a
real
while.
gems. Anyway, my question to both of you is looking for a residential program for my son. I do have plans that I'm trying to get finished, where he will live in his own house and be taken care of by not sure who yet, but he is what I would call medically fragile, complex needs, one-on-one, needs to be fed, doesn't speak. A lot different than any of the people I saw in these the slides you showed. So what can you tell me that I could possibly look into or plan, or are you thinking about bringing in these medically complex, I'm going to call them kids even though they're not.
Yeah, you're kids.
Okay, thank you.
That is an excellent question, and the broad answer is that not all providers can be all things to all people. Just this past year, the state kind of is shifting a paradigm in the way that they fund providers, and there are now 3 tiers of providers. We have a very large amount of primary providers. That's where Emmaus came in. I don't know, PACC.
Yes. Well, we don't even have 10.
Okay.
clients yet,
you're
so
not.
we're not even ranked.
It's a big
We're
paradigm
too new
shift.
for that. Yeah.
So your first tier are good providers, but they're primary providers. We're a primary provider. The next tier is select, and select offers a little bit more clinical support, behavioral support, collects a lot more data, typically is a little bit larger. And the third tier is clinically enhanced. So clinically enhanced are going to be your providers who have on-staff medical, nursing, psychiatric, etc., probably more one-person homes. There are not a lot of them right now. So the key is going to be working with your supports coordinator to, at a minimum, I'd say, you know from what you described, I am looking for a select or preferably a clinically enhanced provider. Those are more likely going to be able to meet your son's needs. So,
And are there any in Pittsburgh?
in Pittsburgh, I believe in Allegheny County, but I don't know about Pittsburgh. That list just came out. It just came out like maybe 2 months ago. So it is accessible, and I can try and get my hands on that. I also brought literature in my business card. So if you do have specific questions, please do, you can reach out to us after. But so the answer is, yeah, there's a spectrum of providers. And some are really good at the medically fragile and or the behavioral. Others are good at other things, maybe the people with Down syndrome. Here's a good outcome. It's getting more complex for all of us as providers, because back when institutions started to close, I remember big debates. People are going to die if they're served in the community. I mean, there were family advocates fighting to keep the institutions open because they didn't want their loved one to die in the community with poor care. So now, fast forward 30 plus years, people are living longer. People are outliving their parents, right? And they're we have done in-home hospice for 4 of our individuals. So in the home where we have served them for 10, 20, 25 years, we've done in-home hospice. When somebody comes to an Emmaus home, we're making a commitment to take them for life. Now, in one instance, somebody did end up in a nursing home because her needs exceeded what we could provide. So people also do move between providers sometimes.
I want to just jump in and add one other thing, both to your question and to anybody else's. When you are looking for residential providers, ask if it's their intention to serve someone throughout their life, because some people will, some agencies, I'm just throwing these suggestions out there. Some agencies will keep someone as long as they aren't medically complex, and then some agencies try to build in and have training programs so that their staff can really, it's a lifetime placement, that if they grow older and they have dementia, if they have some other just normal aging associated, that they'll be able to provide for those supports. So that's one of the questions everyone should be asking when you're looking. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no, to develop a list of questions I recommend touring places. And the other thing is, if you're sitting here thinking, I'm not ready yet, or my son or daughter's not ready yet, it is never too early to start planning like you're doing, because it's going to take a very long time. Right? There are not a lot of vacancies, and it takes it's very labor intensive to buy, renovate, license, open the house, staff it, and provide the service. So it's going to take a long time. If you had a conversation today, nobody's going to call you tomorrow and say, hey, we have an opening, it's now or never. Are you ready to move next month? That's
people that I know are having their child stay in their home. So it's not like we're looking for a home.
Yes.
We want an agency to come in and take care of them in their own home.
And the state is trying to be more responsive to that, and to, they want us to be creative, but then they put a lot of rules and regs around that creativity, and it's difficult. So in today's climate, there's hope. There's hope for new ideas. I think working with supports coordinator, people at the county and people at the state, like, here's our vision. The state is open to listening to families. So now's a good time to plant some seeds.
I have two questions. The first is, it seems like an individual might, throughout their lifetime, go to this day program, and then they outgrow that day program. And so when you think about where they're going to live, they don't move where they're living from here to here to here. But like anywhere I'm looking could be an hour away from my home where I am. So do you pick a home close to where you live, or do you pick close to where they are, but then they move from where they are? So that's the first question. The second question regarding this, I've been touring some homes, and there's one place that I said, well, this home is in the middle of nowhere. Like, where are no neighbors? And they said, well, there are a lot of neighbors who are not accepting of individuals. If we had one person that went across the street and knocked on the door, and the person started screaming at them. So there seems to be some philosophy on some of the types of organizations that you put them in the middle of nowhere so they won't bother any neighbors. And then other places will, like, there'll be one house within the street and you can't tell. It's just like a normal neighborhood. So I'm starting to see, and then I even heard one person say, well, that organization has not been good neighbors to us. And it just feels like there's not a lot of acceptance. And I just wanted to see if you could give some input in those two questions.
So regarding your first question, most adults without disability do live in several different places and several different configurations throughout their life, right? They may live on their own, then they live with a housemate, then they might get married, and then they might be single again, but we move around in our life. We do have, like, our very next home is not for new residents. We are moving 2 women with Down syndrome who are over age 50. Their bedrooms are currently on the 2nd floor, and one is starting to exhibit early onset dementia, so we are moving them to a single a level entry ranch home. Sometimes, hard as we try, or we thought this housemate configuration was going to work out, we give it a year or 2, doesn't work out, somebody moves in with somebody that it does work out. So people do move around within programs. And I just want to say, so I don't forget, we've also sometimes, if I know somebody wants Emmaus and we don't have a house, we don't have a vacancy, we don't have capacity to say yes, but they're in a really serious situation, I have counseled people to say, take what's offered, and then you can transfer. Back in the day, when Lori and I got in this field, the money was with the bed. So if you left, the money stayed with that bed, even if it was empty for the next 2 years. Now the money follows the person.
Yeah.
It is your child's waiver. So if you go with a PACC, they get funded under PACC. They move to Emmaus, they're going to be funded at Emmaus. So you really do have more choice and selection today in that. So does that help
Yes, it
answer
does.
that question?
It does, 'cause I thought, just like one of the organization, is renovating the house for the specific needs of these 3 individuals.
Yes.
But because they're working, they got a job 5 minutes down the road. But what if that job goes away? Then they're in this house and they might need to go an hour waiting for a job. Like, I'm trying to understand this.
These are the questions that I lose sleep over. At
Like,
night
I
sometimes.
just-
Because there's no great answer, because it's the what if, and it's life. All of those things happen. If it has happened to your kids without disabilities, it's going to happen to your kids with disabilities. There's not going to be like the first placement might be the perfect. If you're lucky, it might be the one and last for 15, 20, 30 years. But it is not uncommon for people to move for a host of reasons.
Okay.
Right? And that happens through annual meetings and discussions and team decisions. Regarding your second question, things have improved. Things are better than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. But in some neighborhoods and in some households, things have not improved. And I'm just sad to say that there are people who just don't get it. We're lucky in most of our neighborhoods. We don't have any out in the middle of nowhere. Ours are all in suburban neighborhoods, okay? Well, Greenfield's going to be a city neighborhood. We work very hard at introducing ourselves when we buy a house. In fact, the house that the 2 women are going to be moving into, my facilities manager, Keith, and I were at the house doing some prep work and whatnot, and the neighbor came out and made the assumption that we were the couple that was moving in. so we had a good, and that's not the first time that's happened. So we have our story that we share, and this neighbor was very excited to hear it, very happy. The person we bought, he was good friends with, so she knew us and was happy to sell to us very well. He happened to have a cousin who had IDD, but we have also had some very unfortunate, not so friendly neighbors, and we take a very active approach in addressing that. I have sat in people's living rooms and knocked on doors and invited people to visit, to tour. We've been reported, that we have lice and health department came out and I said, great, come on in, because all of our houses are homes that I'd love to live in. That's one of the criteria. Would my family feel happy here? And is this a good enough house? But there's just a lot of assumptions still.
So I have something to add to that also. I'm just going to share this little story with you because I love to talk. But 30 years ago, there was a lot of preconceived notions about what a community home would look like in a community. A lot of times when we tried to move in before the Federal Fair Housing Act, neighbors would protest. That happened with one of the first houses that we had when I moved in. It was Baldwin. The area was Baldwin in the South Hills. And we moved 3 elderly women who had spent most of their lives in an institution. And they looked like they had been in an institution. They had had a rough time of things. They hadn't had dental care. And we moved in next to a family that had a little 4-year-old girl. And when they first moved in, you could tell the family kind of rushed from the car to get into their house. Over the course, this was in the summer, it was around July. Over the course of the remainder of the summer, the ladies liked to sit out on the front porch, and they started recognizing the neighbors, so they'd start waving. The little girl would start waving back. I hope I don't choke up when I say this. On November, the little 4-year-old girl showed up with her parents and said, "Can I come in and have Thanksgiving dinner?" And we said, of course you can. So we invited her in, and the entire community changed. You saw the parents then tell the neighbors, hey, this is a great place. Hey, our daughter's really become involved. She looks forward to this. These women are so sweet. And so that's part of people who get involved in this kind of work and who've been in the fields as long as we have, you have a social responsibility too. And those kinds of things really, I mean, I'm talking about it now like it happened last week, and it didn't. It happened 35 years ago. But so I think places where we do meet resistance, it's our obligation to, like Karen said, to move in, to say, hey, here's what we're about. You know, do you have questions? What can we do? You know, hey, we're planting these flowers, we're tending to vegetable gardens, and we really have that responsibility. And I think that's what's brought us as far as we are now. So while we do still have some areas there might be some initial resistance in, I think we've come a long way, and I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
Harry.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question, and it's, you know, it's out there, but it's a lot better. And it's about relationship. Inside the house and out, it's about relationship.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good questions. Anybody else?
I can talk loud.
We know.
Your name. You have to say what's the name? Your name.
My name is Kelly. I have a son who just graduated, and he will be 22 next month. Anyway, my question is how do you handle people who have severe behaviors? And my son is having some issues now, which hopefully will go away because he's never been like this. But I'm gearing up for this might be the way it's going to be. But besides myself, I have a lot of friends who do have kids who have severe behaviors. And I just keep hearing nobody wants them. Even as adults, they don't want them.
I think that that's part of the reason that we have our own behavior department, is so that it can complement, and sometimes it's just as important to work with the staff working with clients as to how to respond. And the thing that we try to get across to all of our staff is behavior really is a mode of communication. You know, it's not that people are saying, let me do this, to just, perhaps they have a deficit in expressing verbally exactly what they want. So that's part of what our behavior department does, is to meet with people, to support them. So I would say, as you're, and you can receive behavior services at home. So that's something available to you now. But I would say, as you're looking at residential programs, make sure that it's somebody who can support someone adequately, and that they won't be, you know, scared off by maybe some things that they have to work through.
I think that's the problem. There aren't many that will accept these kids.
Well, Emmaus just hired our own. We used to contract with 5 or 6 different behavior support programs, and we just hired our own because the turnover was so high, you know, which just meant compromised quality. And so we now have in-house. She is just focused on our residents primarily. And you know, when you hear that, well, nobody wants them. No, providers might be willing. It's like I said earlier, the staff that we need to do that well just aren't out there. I think we need to work with universities and institutes of higher learning. We're here in Pittsburgh. We have so many resources, colleges, universities, and the dean of the School of Social Work. I've come to know her really well. We had about a 3-hour conversation at the end. She said, so we're not cranking out the students you need. I said, right. Like they have master's degrees in social work, and they don't know the first thing we need them to know to work in this field with somebody like your son. They just are ill-equipped. So we have some work to do. I will never lose hope that we can get there, but there is a deficit in the field.
Well, there's definitely a deficit because even day programs
Yes.
are very difficult. My son, forget about the behaviors because they may resolve, like I said, but him not being fully toilet trained, you can't imagine how many will not take him.
Just because of that, yeah. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Questions?
Somebody had a question here.
Steph, I have a 25-year-old son, Swiftly. 2 questions. Do you staff homes not owned by yourselves? That's 1. And 2, how would someone go about picking an agency?
Right. I'm not sure if you mean, I think what you mean by do we staff homes that aren't our own? Can you get assistance in your own home? Is that what you mean, or do you mean?
That could be a version, but it could also just be somebody buys a house, they own the house. Do you
That was your question.
work in the house?
So we are actually working with one family now who, the gentleman had his own apartment and they're adapting it to what he needs, and we will provide services in there. So yes.
And the determining factors are really the level of support. So whether Emmaus, we own all but 2 of our homes. We do lease 2 of our homes that actually, small side story, but a neighbor at one of the block parties where we do have a house came to know our people. They have a home then in the city, Green Tree City, and they said, we're not ready to move in there for when we retire. Would you like to rent it from us? We still had to license it because the people who are going to receive services there need 24/7. So if somebody needed 30 hours or less, you could have an unlicensed house that the agency can own, rent, or lease. So yes, it can happen. We've had families saying, and we've never gone down this road to the end, but we've had conversations. What if I buy, we live here, we own property, we want to build a house for our child to live next door to us. Would you then be able to provide the services? It could happen. There's a lot of legalese we haven't really gotten into, because can we commit to you, it's your child, your house, but something happens 2 years in or 3 years in and we can't provide the supports, then what? How is that support going to happen? Also, most homes are 2 and 3 person homes. The state allows 4-person homes today. We've done 4 in the past. We find 2 is a sweet spot, 3 is a crowd sometimes. So you asked, how do you determine a home? There are resources on the internet where if you use AI and say, what questions to ask when looking for a good group home? And it will tell you, ask, are they taking you for life? Ask, is there a continuum of care? Ask about behavior supports. Ask about neighborhoods. Ask about backup plans. Ask about staff qualifications. There is a long list that you can ask, can I tour? Ask, what would I be allowed to visit? Sometimes families are afraid once they come to us, it's either or. They're either in the group home or they're not. We strongly encourage family participation. So, we have one frontline supervisor for every 2 homes. And in the homes, you need at least 3 people, right? The 3 shifts. And then a weekend. So at least 4 full-time people to run a house for 7 days a week. Our supervisors have 2 homes, and that supervisor has close contact with family members if there are family members, and we also have individuals that have no one. Just scheduling a weekend visit, scheduling the holidays. When's your individual coming home? When are they coming back? So you want a provider who is open to having good communication with family, where you are allowed to visit the house. Come on in. What's going on? What's for dinner? How does the bedroom look? Anybody helping to keep it up? So you definitely are allowed and should ask those questions. There's a whole host of questions. There's a tool out there that I haven't seen in a while for families, like what to ask. Allegheny County has a tool, what to ask when you're researching a group home or community living.
And as far as the physical, and I think I'm not enough without this, but
They're recording it. They're really better at home.
in as far as the physical site goes, there are some requirements set forth by the state. The bedrooms have to be a certain size. There have to be windows. It's 200 pages long. Our group of regulations just from the state, and so that's what we are currently doing, is making sure that the family we're working with, that the physical site meets all of the requirements so that we can have it licensed to provide those services.
Hi, my name's Maureen. I have a son who is 28. And I'm wondering, what does a house look like? I can't see him needing a fully group home, but I can't see him needing as less as minimum as 30 hours. So what am I looking for?
That's a really good question, and I didn't talk about this. So even though our licensed group homes are staffed 24/7, people are allowed to have alone time. It's written into their individual support plan. So we have some people who can only have 2 hours. We have one person who can have up to 16 hours a day, but she's still in a licensed group home. So his needs could be met, and that would be baked into his daily plan, what type of, what type of housemate he'd be paired with, so that he could have alone time. Both we outline in ISPs alone time in the community. Some people can go into Walmart by themselves. Staff waits outside. If they need help, check out, we're there. But they can be alone. And then we have people who can and want to be alone for 2 or 3 hours at home just to exercise that independence.
Right.
So that is doable. And then you probably do want like licensed group home, but with some alone time, official alone time. It's very strictly regulated, even that. If somebody had, say, 2 hours of alone time and we left them alone for 3 hours, we're going to be doing an investigation for neglect on our own staff.
Oh, wow.
So it's that serious. So it just has to be spelled out and agreed upon. And he could definitely have alone time.
Okay, well, no,
He would be encouraged to be as independent as he could possibly be.
that's where we are. I mean,
Yes.
I feel like he's a 12-year-old, to be honest.
Yes.
Again, we need some guidance and support if somebody strange came to the door,
Yes.
but he can make a few basic meals by himself. I mean, we've worked hard. He does his own laundry. He's got a lot of good independent skills.
Yes.
Like I always think of like a college dorm as a perfect way for him to live.
Sure. With some peer support.
He can show up and get food and,
Yes.
he can navigate pretty well, but
Yes.
some of the other kids.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of assisted technology out now that, if he would need help with taking medications, timers that would allow that,
That's again, once he's trained, he can do all of that. He takes his own medication, he supervises himself, all of those kind of things, like laundry. Come to my house on Wednesday, it's gonna be done.
I will.
So that part is very good, but I don't see him being able to do an unlicensed home with just 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
Basically.
Face to face, right. So one of the, with this performance-based contracting and the availability and introduction, there's a much higher expectation of all of us, our individuals and our staff and our agencies using technology. And one of the new supports and there's some funding for it, it's called remote supports. And so remote supports is to not replace staff support, but to supplement. Part of it was introduced because of the staffing shortage. So it's an interactive screen. Literally, it's like on the wall of the living room or the hallway by the kitchen, and it is staffed remotely. So one staff might be sitting in a room like this, monitoring 5 homes, right, with 10 people, and they can call in and access face-to-face remote virtual assistance at any time. So the state and the system and providers, I was just at a presentation last week about a provider we're actually going to partner because there's no return on investment or feasibility financially until you get 5 or 6 homes. So I'm going to partner with another agency until we have enough people receiving remote supports where it does make sense for us to do that. So that's another up and coming. That's another question to add to the list. Like, do you offer remote supports for people that, don't need this much, but don't need that much either? Excellent questions. Yes.
My name is Martha Fox. I have a son that's 30. His name is Michael. He does live in a group home, and I think it's been a wonderful experience. I came here today, even though my son is set in his group home. It's run by Berlin and the branch, and Allison is a big part of that. And I've been loving it, and he's been loving it. I just wanted to know with the climate, with the $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, do you think there's a possibility of, why are we doing this? Why is there 24/7 staff for one person in one apartment? And that's not my words. That's the thought process. Is there any fear of, we go back to institutions? Because it's expensive. What do you think?
I've been thinking a lot about that since January, and most especially this past summer. We've made a lot of phone calls sent a lot of emails, had a lot of conversation because the risk is real. I have come to understand and believe most of us in IDD, if your child has a diagnosis of intellectual disability and has an IDD waiver and I think we're going to be pretty safe. I think it's going to be okay. And Lori and I were talking about this very thing right before. I think what's going to, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, the impact is going to be felt because our state relies on what's called the FMAP, the Federal Matching Program, right? It's 50% of what Pennsylvania spends, we get back. What are the chances Pennsylvania, if we lost 50% of IDD funding, is going to raise taxes enough to cover that other 50%? Slim to none. So I think that immediately over the next few years, breathing room, it's going to feel okay. You know, Ken and Lorraine, who started Emmaus, they were never, ever just worried about their daughter Cece. They worried about her and others like her friends, right? And so we did residential, respite. Now we do this other. Advocacy is really one of our prongs, and I did not really even talk about that. For us, advocacy is not necessarily going to Harrisburg or DC, although I've done both of those things, but it is fighting not just for our people, for all people with IDD. And I think the impact, you can't do more with less. I'm a social worker for 35 years, and I'm so tired of hearing, well, do more with less. Just got to learn how to do more. You can't. You can't. Our staff are underpaid. That's part of, not the only, but it is part of the reason people are not coming. People literally cannot afford to work in this field. It's Medicaid. They, until last year, $13.13 for a DSP wage is how they built the rates. Come on, if you have kids who babysit, they make more than $13 an hour, and they're not passing meds and, doing the myriad of other things a residential DSP is doing. So I think that we have our work cut out for us. I'm still finding my voice after 30 plus years in the field. Probably as a mom, you are too. I mean, you get to a point and
like what you said, I want to get involved because I feel like sometimes I go out, I have a lot of friends here, close friends, that I feel like, I hate to say it because I care for them, their kids. Yes. I feel like my kid is set. Like, yes. Oh my God, my kid is set. And their kids are.
We love you, Mark.
No, but it breaks me.
I do think people on the waiting list are going to wait longer. I think the waiting list is going to get bigger. Yeah. I think the services might shrink because the fight is so hard. Providers just say, you know what, we're not equipped to keep up. Yeah. The fight and the direct care, the direct service and what have you. So I think definitely getting involved, phone calls and emails. And I have a friend who has a parent, and her son is not one of our individuals, but he's been out of high school now maybe 2 years. He's living the life, and she's an advocate. She's a fierce advocate. She's been on boards of other IDD providers. She had a lot of conversations with people who don't really understand why she was fighting so hard for Medicaid. I mean, these are friends of hers. I mean, she's an attorney. She's well-versed. She's not afraid to speak out, and she couldn't change minds. Even people who love her and her son couldn't really understand the threat to Medicaid and its impact. So when it starts to hit home, I think when it starts to hit our education system, right. We're just going to have to go back to the 60s and the 70s and do some hardcore marching, singing. I'm all about, give me a guitar, I'll start singing. We shall overcome. I mean, we're going to have to go back to some old-fashioned advocacy and get out there.
That's what I was thinking, Karen. I want to try to give everybody a message of hope, too, because the last agency that I worked for was started by a group of parents. And it was parents who were advocates, had their children at home, and it was during the deinstitutionalization. And they basically bugged Allegheny County long enough and hard enough, and they said, we want to start an agency. We know you're bringing these folks out of institutions and you're putting them into community homes, but what is going to happen to our kids? We have them at home now. We're taking care of them. We love them. We want them to be with us. But what happens when we're older and we can't, or we get ill, or we become impaired in some way and can't? And it was that group of parents that started my last organization. PACC that I'm with now, we had parents, they were the start of us starting group homes. Karen will tell you, I thought my CEO was nuts for taking this task on now, but she had so many parents come to her and say, we want the services you provide. We know you provide good services. Our kid goes to your activities. We don't want him, we don't want her to lose their friends, the activities that they do. Won't you consider? And that's actually how this program came to be, because we had so many parents involved in asking for it. So don't any one of you guys underestimate the power that you have, whether it's through your own voice or getting more people involved. And, you know, we can always try to send out, you know how Provider Alliance sends out the advocacy things, we can always try to share them with whoever, you know, and just say, hey, call this person, you know, they're voting on this bill, here's what it means to us. I think if we hadn't inundated them, we might have seen more change than we have.
I don't know that I'm that optimistic, but maybe I would have blown it pretty hard. And the day I lose hope is the day I should retire. Okay, so I will always, I'm in it because of hope. You know, I will fight with my last breath, you know, to keep my organization alive and to keep services available for our people and others. But there is a waiting list in Pennsylvania that is somewhere between, depending on who you're asking, between 11,000 and 13,000 people. That's not acceptable. Like, how is any cut going to serve more people off that waiting list? So one of the things
is that for waiver or to get into a home?
So some of those people, that's for full services. So there's a planning list that includes planning, emergency and crisis. Emergency might be 1 to 5 years. Crisis means your parent has died and you need place tomorrow. So there's this planning list. You could be on there 15, 20 years, right? So some people on this waiting list do have a waiver, but they're not fully funded. So some of you might, especially where your folks live at home, have the PUNS, the priority for utilization of needs and services. That's saying either their needs are fully met because they're at home and they have respite and they have supports coordination and they have day program, boom. It might say partially met. They're at home, they have this, and this, but they want residential or need residential within the next X number of years. One thing to understand, and I talk to a lot of parents about this, if you have, and I'll start with the PFD waiver, that's the smallest waiver, right? And it's, we'll say it's 40, it might be 43 now, but whatever it's capped at, if you're only spending 20,000 of that, the county and the state say you are fully served. Because if you weren't, you'd be bumping up against the cap, right? So if you're planning for residential in the next 1, 5, 10 years, and let's say you have community living waiver, all right, that's capped at say 75 or 80 now.
97.
But how much is it?
97.
97. Thank you. I hadn't heard that last bump, so that's good. But if you're only spending 80, you're fully served. Why would you need residential if you're not even spending the total CLA waiver? So whatever waiver you have, just start planning now. Like, try and stay on your SC. The SCs, in their defense, since I was in the field, their caseloads are too big. And now they're going through performance-based contracting. So they have a whole new set of rules and regs and expectations, and what do they call them? Metrics to learn and implement. So but if you get a good one, or if you stay on a new one, you're well educated, keep on them and keep on them and keep on them. So just start to learn how it works. The system is very crisis driven, right? The people that bump to the top of that waiting list, the parent has died. That is never preferable to welcome. We've welcomed people in planning and we welcome people in crisis. And it's always preferable to get your adult child well established in whatever neighborhood it is, with whatever housemate, with whatever provider, before you're not around, So just this whole waiver thing, and it's hard to maximize those waivers when you can't find a provider. Right. There's new waiver slots, and people who have never had waiver right now are getting it. They're like, oh my God, fiscal year just started. Like, I have the waiver, okay. And they can't find a provider. Right. They can't find the service.
And we have seen just this past year with our residential program, folks who are not at the crisis level be put in line for full waiver funding, and when a spot that they want becomes available and the need is there, they get bumped up rather quickly, we've seen. So again, it's a response to a crisis, to a critical situation. You don't want to wait till then to plan. You can start looking, you can start planning, you can get your ideas, but know that when that need arises, you'll be able to move on it, and hopefully have done at least the legwork of looking at, you know, do you want to be in the city? Do you want to be in the suburbs? What particular agency? Because they all do sort of have their niche, you know, of what agency do you feel would be best for your loved one?
Okay, and I think we have one more question. I'm gonna give Ellen the microphone. And Will's gonna stay for another half hour so we can have questions, you know, as long as it's okay with you.
That's perfect. We're available.
Hi, my name is Ellen. I have a 31-year-old son, Brendan, that's still at home. So I guess my question is, Karen and I have been talking frequently. First question would be how do I find out when there is an opening? Is my supports coordinator the only person that has that master list that knows when an opening for something I'm interested in is available? Because how do you plan when you don't have all the information to plan?
Well, that's a really good question. The supports coordinator is your broker of services, but the county also keeps data, but the county is now called an administrative entity, so they're really not in the business of sharing that kind of information. And so ultimately the state manages the wait list. So they're used when we were, you know, back in the day, there was a waiting list, but there was no wait list. It just meant the people out there waiting. Now there is this list, right, with names on it and emergency planning crisis. But like I keep a waiting list at Emmaus of people I know are interested in Emmaus services. But I won't be the determining factor of whether Emmaus, it's going to depend, does the person have the right waiver? Do they have the right funding? And then the timing of the home and all of that. So it's like getting the sun, the moon, and the stars to align when you're talking residential. But then I have board members that don't forget who's in charge of the sun, the moon, and the stars. So it really, it's a very hard question to answer because it's not linear. It's not like number 2 gets placed after number 1, because if the person who's 13th on the list has a parent die, they're jumping right up to 1 and you're back down to 2. So it's very, very difficult.
So is it, as a parent, should be, if you find an organization or that you're interested in, that you like, and they have homes in your area, is there a waiting list to get on? I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense because I know exactly what I want. My son's had consolidated waiver for years.
Yes.
I know exactly where I want it to be.
Right.
But there's no home.
Right. Yeah, make your supports coordinator aware, all right? And then have frequent conversations. And yes, I would continue, whether it's continuing conversations with Emmaus or whatever other providers, because it's possible another opportunity comes along. If we're taking too long and another provider can answer those same needs quicker, you still could change down the road, you know?
But there is no mechanism.
But there's
for a
really
parent to
no,
look.
there's really no, so you can
no
go to
MLS.
HCSIS is the Home and Community Supports Information System. HCSIS is the state website. And under HCSIS, you can find a provider directory. You can look by county, by service, or by name of provider. So you could put in residential and you're just gonna get a slew, and it's overwhelmed. There are over 400 residential providers.
Right, you don't even know if they have any open.
Exactly.
So what about the good ones?
So part of what you can do too is if you know your dream organization, I would reach out to whoever's in charge of the residential program there, because I think sometimes as far as planning goes, we're in the stages now where we have our first 5 homes pretty much planned. Our CEO is starting to do, probably by this winter, she will kind of open up another informational talk for parents of the clients that we're affiliated with, but there's no reason that other people couldn't attend just to hear about what areas are we looking to expand in, to find out what are people's needs. Because for instance, the 3 gentlemen who are moving in at the end of this summer, those 3 parents came to us and said, look, we're all getting to the age where we're going to need services. We know it's critical. 2 of them had funding, 1 did not. Their boys had grown up together. They were interested in them. We weren't really planning to open that house, but everything seemed to kind of come together. And so here they are moving in. So if you know your organization, I would reach out and just say, hey, what are your plans? Are you planning to open more houses? What would you need to open more? I'm very interested. Can I give you my contact information? And at least that way you can kind of skip over that AE business. And when you know somebody has an opening, then you can go and say, I want my child to be at Emmaus. I want my child to be at PA Connecting Communities. And I know they have an opening come up.
Yeah.
And
then
sometimes that can push things along.
And as Ellen knows too well, sometimes that changes as well. We were going down path A and 2 unexpected things happened. And so we're at plan C now. So sometimes what we thought was going to happen because of the crisis nature of the bigger system that we're operating in. So it's a very difficult, rocky road. There's just no linear path. But ongoing conversations, keeping yourself on the radar, in the mix, and starting with also if your residential provider does in-home supports, I highly recommend getting them involved with the in-home supports while they're waiting for residential, because the provider, the staff who work there, get to know your individual. It makes for us, they start to make friends. Maybe there's a bowling league. They're introduced to the people that live in this house at the Christmas party or whatever they're engaged in. So starting with in-home supports or some other ancillary non-residential can set the stage for a good transition from living at home to living with the residential provider.
Yeah.
Does that help?
The same people, like if you have people start in-home, can you then get a home?
Yes, you can transition. Several of our folks have started in-home, then become residents, or we used to do a lot more respite. They would come in respite, and then they would come in residential.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I'm Marcy Fisher. I forgot to say my name before. I have a 20-year-old son who hasn't transitioned yet. So the question I have is, when I was touring the home where they said, we're going to put them in the middle of nowhere because of the neighbors, they took the tour through the person's bedroom. You could see that they had the pens there. They had, what their hobbies were. And then whenever we happened to be there, whenever the individual showed up and the individual started to have some behaviors, and I thought, oh my goodness, we're in their home doing this tour and this is disruptive, and and this feels unsafe for my family member to be in a situation like that later. And so I guess with that, my thought is, why not institutions? I'd like you to explain to me why not. Like my mother-in-law, for example, was in Hampton Fields, and it was independent living. She has a disability, and they all come down to eat, or they go get transportation to their doctor's appointments. And why wouldn't an institutional model with oversight of staff and making sure there's no abuse going on? And why did they transition from that model? And why wouldn't that be a good model, like the college dorm situation?
Yeah, there is, if you watch the documentary about Willowbrook. So institutions, I did a research paper many moons ago. They started out with good intentions. They were meant to be habilitative. Come live here, we will teach you, we will habilitate, and we will reintroduce you to society. Well, that didn't happen. So they stayed, then more people, so overcrowding happened. It's not person-centered. It does not offer the same opportunities. Like our whole philosophy is giving the same quality of life that everybody here enjoys for our residents. And if you're living in an institution, you don't have neighbors, you don't have family style meals, you don't have one-on-one time, you're not going out to the movies, with a couple of friends. So you're not getting an everyday life. It's really about providing an everyday life, and there's just nothing about an institution that speaks to everyday life. And It's just so when I first got in the field, and my husband and I were house parents for 23 boys ages 6 to 21. That was an old school model. I lived it. It did not work well. You just couldn't be present to 23 boys ages 6 to 21. You can't be present to 60 people living on a ward. You just cannot. We have supported people who came out of Polk and Selinsgrove. And the stories they tell, it's unbelievable. That's in my lifetime. Teeth being pulled without anesthesia.
I want to hear.
Okay. It's really, I just can't emphasize, there were some good people in there, but the whole was worse than the sum of its parts. And so I just still think we can go back there. Don't think we can go backwards.
I don't know.
The long, Willowbrook is a really good, hard to watch documentary. Will give you a history lesson in institutionalization and why we don't want to go back. Penhurst is Pennsylvania, and then yes.
I mean, those were really bad.
Willowbrook is New York, and Penhurst was Pennsylvania. There is one I love.
Thank you all. I want to thank our speakers, especially. It's very informative, and I really appreciate everyone's questions. We build in some networking time to our meetings, so we're gonna stay here, or I'm gonna stay here until 8:30. You don't have to, but if you want to ask questions of the speakers, ask questions of other parents, just have something to eat or drink, please help yourself.
Thank you.